通訳者がいないなら、契約の話はここで終わりだ. If there is no interpreter, then the deal ends here. The words landed like a gavel cracking against marble. Mr. Hoshino's voice didn't rise, he didn't need volume to command the room. The fluent, razor-sharp Japanese sent a ripple of confusion through the conference table. Only one person understood exactly what had just been said, and she didn't speak Japanese. Rose Harding stood still at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, her body as composed as a general on the eve of battle. She didn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Something was wrong, dead wrong. The room around her, a towering corner office in Manhattan's Midtown, was silent. Her team exchanged nervous glances. The translator she'd hired, an agency-certified pro, had called in minutes ago. Car accident. Mild injuries, but unavailable. Bad luck? Number. This was a bomb. Hoshino, the elusive Japanese tech investor, had flown in for this meeting one shot to lock in a $200 million co-venture. And here she was, a CEO who had clawed her way out of the Bronx, about to watch a decade's work evaporate because no one in the building could bridge a language gap. Do something, hissed Carlyle Grant, the VP of Finance, under his breath. Fix this. I need 5 minutes, Rose said, turning to her assistant, who was already frantically texting. You don't have 5 minutes, Carlyle snapped. We're already on borrowed time. Mr. Hoshino sat in silence, stirring his tea, seemingly unbothered, but his eyes, dark and razor-focused, said otherwise. His legal advisor leaned in to whisper something, and the older man gave a faint nod, already rising from his chair. Then came a voice, soft, male, respectful, speaking in measured, confident Japanese. Shirei-shimasu. Otetsudai dekiru kamoshiremasen. Excuse me, I may be able to help. All heads turned. Standing just inside the open conference room door was a tall, broad-shouldered black man in a navy blue security uniform. His keychain rattled gently at his hip. Victor Thomas, Night Security, known by name to no one in the room. I speak Japanese, he said, switching to English for clarity. If I may be of use. If you felt inspired by Victor's quiet courage, please like and leave a comment below. Sometimes justice begins with the smallest act, and subscribe. No one moved. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Hoshino smiled. Not a social formality, a real smile. He spoke to Victor in quick, elegant Japanese. Victor responded without hesitation, his tone measured and deferential. A conversation sparked between them, as fluid and natural as if they'd been colleagues for years. Rose blinked. She felt a strange tilt in her stomach. Not quite shock, not yet relief, just wonder. Victor looked at her. I can translate, if that's acceptable. She hesitated. Do you have any experience with business-level interpretation? Victor nodded. I studied in Kyoto, spent 6 years in international policy before changing paths. Rose had no time for biographies. Sit, please. Victor stepped in, calm as an evening tide. No notes, no devices, no panic, just presence. The meeting resumed. With Victor translating, the tone of the room transformed. What had been tension-filled became fluent, rhythmic. Victor didn't just convey words, he captured tone, humor, nuance. The Japanese investors leaned forward now, engaged. Rose watched, arms folded, eyes narrowed, not in suspicion but recalibration. Something unexpected was unfolding. And she knew, with the instinct of a woman who had been underestimated her entire life, that this man was not ordinary. The hour passed quickly. When the discussion ended, Mr. Hoshino shook Victor's hand firmly and said in English, "You carry the language with respect. That is rare." Victor bowed lightly. "Thank you, sir." After everyone left, Carlyle stalked toward Rose. "You can't seriously consider using a night guard for a billion-dollar deal." Rose didn't look at him. "I consider the person who saved it." Back in her office, with the skyline twinkling behind her, Rose dialed HR. Her voice was soft but precise. "Find out everything you can about Victor Thomas, quietly." Victor Thomas had never intended to stand out. In fact, for the past 8 years, he had mastered the art of blending in. Quiet entrances, minimal eye contact, polite nods. These were the tools of a man who'd learned long ago that sometimes invisibility was safer than recognition. But the moment he stepped out of the conference room that day, he felt that something had shifted. The stares, the surprised murmurs, the sudden awareness of his existence after years of being just the guy at the desk downstairs. He took the service elevator, a habit formed from years of avoiding crowded spaces, and returned to the lower lobby, where the night team was transitioning into the morning shift. The front desk clerk, a young kid named Julio, looked up, eyes wide. "Victor, man, what did you do up there? I just had 3 execs come through here saying you're the reason their Japan deal didn't explode." Victor offered a modest shrug. Right place, right time. He didn't say more. There was no point. No one needed to know the years he'd spent as a military linguist, the scholarships, the Fulbright in Kyoto, the consultancy work that came to a screeching halt the moment his wife was diagnosed with late-stage lymphoma. He'd been 37 then. With no family to lean on and a daughter barely in preschool, he chose the only job that offered stability, night hours, and insurance. And so, for the past 8 years, he had become just Victor, the quiet security guy who always held the door, brought in donuts on Fridays, and whose Japanese fluency was known only to the walls of his modest apartment, where he still read Murakami aloud to keep his skills alive. Upstairs, Rose Harding stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her office, staring out over 6th Avenue. She wasn't thinking about traffic or the rhythm of pedestrians. She was thinking about the way Victor had bowed, not like someone mimicking form, but someone who understood meaning. She'd seen executives butcher attempts at cultural protocol with arrogant showmanship, but Victor, he moved like someone who had lived the language, not learned it. Her phone rang. "You asked me to check into Victor Thomas," said the head of HR, a woman named Denise. "Yes," discreetly, Rose replied. "What did you find?" "He's clean, no red flags, night security for 8 years. But before that, well, I dug a bit deeper." Denise paused. "He has a master's in international relations from Georgetown, fluent in 4 languages, worked at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. But there's a gap about a decade ago. It ends abruptly." Rose leaned back in her chair, eyebrows raised. "Why would a man with that background be working security?" Denise hesitated. "I don't know, but the more I read, the more I think we got extremely lucky. Set up a one-on-one with him. No formal HR, just casual. Bring him to my office after hours." At 6:45 that evening, after the building quieted and most of the staff had gone home, Victor received a message over the internal comms. "Miss Harding would like a word. Office 47 Ampere." He didn't rush. He walked slowly, deliberately, knowing full well that moments like this rarely came again. When he entered, Rose was seated not behind her desk, but at the small seating area near the bookshelf, 2 cups of coffee on the table. "Mr. Thomas," she greeted. "Please, sit." He nodded and took the seat across from her. "Call me Victor. Then you should call me Rose." She leaned forward. "I want to thank you. Today could have ended in disaster." "It wasn't much," Victor replied. "It was everything," Rose said firmly. "You didn't just translate. You held that room together." There was a pause. She studied his face. Calm, weathered, honest. "Your file says you studied in Japan. Embassy work. But then, nothing." "Why?" Victor met her eyes without flinching. "My wife got sick. Cancer. Stage 4. We had no family. Just me and our daughter. I needed a job that paid for treatment and let me be home during the day. So, I applied for this. 1 building, 1 shift, health benefits. It wasn't a hard choice." Rose exhaled slowly. "I understand more than you think." She didn't explain. Some things were better left in the quiet between words. "Victor, would you be open to assisting me during the next 2 days? The meetings with Mr. Hoshino continue, and frankly, I trust you more than anyone on my payroll." Victor hesitated. "You realize I'm not an employee in that department. I'm not certified anymore." "What I need can't be certified," she said. "I need someone who understands nuance, not just words, culture, people." He nodded. "Then I'll help." The next morning, Victor wore a simple black blazer over his security uniform. No badges, just clean lines. His daughter Ava had pressed the sleeves with great care before school, grinning. "Daddy, you look like you're going to be on television." The moment he walked into the boardroom, the atmosphere changed. Some looked surprised. Others, Carlyle especially, looked annoyed. But Hoshino smiled, bowed slightly, and gestured to the seat beside him. Victor resumed his role, and the conversations grew even more intricate. At one point, Hoshino made a subtle joke referencing a 17th century haiku about loyalty and loss. Victor caught it instantly, translated it poetically, and even referenced the original author. Hoshino laughed aloud, a rare sound, and turned to Rose. "You found a man with a scholar's mind and a warrior's heart." Rose smiled. "He found us." Behind the scenes, Carlyle fumed. He whispered to an assistant, demanded HR pull protocol memos, and began digging. He didn't like surprises, and Victor Thomas was a very big surprise. That evening, as Victor left the building, he noticed his locker had been opened and rearranged. Nothing stolen, just touched, a message. He didn't mention it to Rose, not yet, but his instincts stirred. Something wasn't right, something bigger than translation or contracts. He had seen patterns like this before during his time in Tokyo, working in diplomatic security. When people got nervous, they got messy, and messy people made mistakes. Victor walked out into the cool New York night, his hands deep in his coat pockets. Above him, the city buzzed on, unaware that within its steel veins, something very old was waking up, a sense of duty, a need for truth, and the quiet courage of a man who had once chosen to be invisible and was now being asked to be seen. Victor sat at the kitchen table in his modest apartment in Queens, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound filling the quiet. Ava, his daughter, was fast asleep in the next room, her school backpack still half-zipped, her sneakers neatly placed by the door like she always did something her mother had taught her. Victor stared at the open folder in front of him, the one he hadn't touched in years. His old credentials, dusty but intact, diplomatic security service badge, clearance papers, certificates in advanced Japanese language and cultural liaison protocols, ghosts of another life. He hadn't looked at them since the day he buried Mia. That life had ended then, until now, until yesterday, until Rose Harding. Her face stayed with him. Not because of beauty, though she had that, but because of how she looked at him, not through him, not past him, at him. Like she was searching for something she thought he might be hiding and hoping he wasn't. The past 2 days had awakened something Victor had kept buried, purpose. But with that purpose came risk, and risk never came alone. The next morning, the air in the boardroom was tight. The negotiations were progressing on the surface at least. But Victor had seen it too many times. Smiles too wide, pauses too long. Mr. Hoshino's lawyers had begun requesting odd documents, technical diagrams, vendor logs, export summaries. Not unusual in isolation, but together, they painted a trail that pointed to something being hidden. Rose noticed it too. She didn't say it, but her eyes flickered during a particular exchange about Northbridge's encryption software licensing. "Victor," she said calmly after the meeting, "walk with me." They moved into the glass corridor overlooking Bryant Park. It was nearly winter, bare trees like fragile bones scratched against the sky. "You felt it too," she said. "They're looking for something." "Or confirming it," Victor replied. "Something about that licensing structure, it's not lining up with the export rules under Japanese law. And Mr. Hoshino wouldn't be this cautious unless he suspected something serious." "I've asked my legal team for a full trace audit," Rose said. "But they've been dragging their feet. It's like they're stalling." "They are," Victor said, voice low. "And I think I know why." That evening, Victor drove to an address he remembered from his security access logs, Northbridge's satellite server center in Long Island City. The building looked unassuming, but the security on the perimeter was tighter than it should have been for what was supposedly just a data backup site. He parked a block away and walked in through the alley entrance, showing his outdated but still active clearance badge. Inside, the hum of servers was deafening. But what caught Victor's attention wasn't the machinery, it was the silence of the staff. Cold, methodical, no chatter, no lightness. People here weren't just working, they were hiding something. He wandered near the internal hardware shipping area, then paused at a clipboard left on a supply crate. Shipping manifests equipment coded for international transfer. Japan, yes, but also Singapore, South Korea. And oddly, 2 unmarked entries. No codes, no destinations. Just weight and classification. High-frequency data modulation units. Victor's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a clerical error. Someone was quietly funneling restricted tech components overseas, possibly through the Hoshino deal itself. It wasn't just unethical, It was illegal. And if Hoshino's legal team discovered it before Rose did, the fallout wouldn't just be a lost deal, it could mean federal investigations, public scandal, and possibly prison time. He took photos of the clipboard, carefully repositioned it, and walked out as calmly as he came. The next morning, he handed Rose a flash drive. "What is this?" she asked. "Proof," Victor said. "You're being set up. Someone inside is using the Hoshino partnership as cover to move restricted components, possibly to inflate valuations, possibly for kickbacks. Either way, if this goes public, you're the face of the company. You'll go down first." Rose went pale but didn't flinch. "How sure are you?" "Sure enough to put everything on the line." She stared at him, the weight of a decade in corporate America pressed behind her eyes. She wasn't afraid for herself, but she was tired of fighting systems built to destroy people like her the moment they made a mistake. "I need to know who," she said. Victor nodded. "Then we start quietly, tonight." That evening, after most of the offices emptied, Victor and Rose returned to the building. Dressed in plain clothes, they moved floor by floor. Victor accessed server logs, reviewed badge entries, and watched security footage from the past 3 weeks. Patterns emerged. A name surfaced: Carlyle Grant, the VP of Finance. The same man who had opposed Victor's involvement from the beginning. He had the access. He had the motive. He had the connections. At 2:43 a.m., they found it. A flagged entry. Carlyle manually approving hardware shipments under a dummy vendor shell. The logs were hidden behind an access mask, but Victor knew how to find it. When they saw the final record, Rose sank into the desk chair. "He's selling off classified tech under falsified contracts, and I'm signing those contracts because I trusted him." Victor sat beside her. "Then it's time to stop trusting and start acting." Rose met his gaze. Her voice didn't shake. "I'm going to the board, tomorrow, with this." "They'll push back," Victor warned. "They'll try to bury it." "Let them try," she said. "I've buried myself long enough. It's time I stood up." Victor looked at her, a quiet pride blooming in his chest. He'd spent years hiding in shadows. But maybe now, in this fight, he could do more than just protect. He could help someone rise. And maybe, just maybe, rise with them. At 8 a.m. sharp, Rose Harding stepped into the boardroom, not as the CEO trying to secure a deal, but as a woman determined to protect everything she had built. She wore a charcoal suit, simple yet sharp, and carried nothing but a single flash drive in her pocket. Her assistant tried to stop her at the door, whispering that several board members had been in contact with Carlyle earlier that morning, but Rose just nodded and kept walking. The table was already half full: men in expensive suits, old guard executives, shareholders, flown in from Los Angeles, Atlanta, even London. Carlyle sat at the far end, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. He didn't rise when Rose entered. That was his first mistake. "Before we begin," Rose said, her voice cutting through the early morning murmur like a bell, "I need 10 minutes of your time. No agenda, no interruptions." Silence fell, but no one objected. She plugged in the flash drive and brought up the first document: internal shipping logs cross, referenced with off-books vendor payments. The room shifted as a few brows furrowed, recognizing terms that didn't belong in any legitimate deal. Next came the security footage, Carlyle alone in the restricted shipping bay after hours, signing off on clearance sheets that had never passed her desk. Then Victor stepped into view, standing in the back, arms folded behind his back, silent, solid. "What you're looking at," Rose said, "is evidence that one of our own has been using the Hoshino deal as a smokescreen to move restricted components internationally, without board consent, without legal clearance, and without my knowledge." Carlyle stood abruptly, his face flushing. "This is a misinterpretation out of context footage and speculative data." Rose turned, full-bodied, like a strike. "Then let's bring in the auditors and the DOJ. Let them decide what's out of context." The boardroom cracked open, tension spilled into anger, a few directors barked questions. Others turned on Carlyle, demanding explanations. The man who had once controlled the tempo of every meeting now found himself cornered. Within 20 minutes, a motion was called for his immediate suspension pending investigation. By the end of the hour, Carlyle Grant was escorted out of the building. And Rose, she didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She only looked across the room at Victor and gave a subtle nod. War wasn't about glory, it was about survival and justice. That evening, Rose sat alone in her office, staring out at the horizon. The city was wrapped in the orange haze of dusk, its buildings cast in long, solemn shadows. A knock sounded. She didn't turn. "Come in." Victor stepped in, carrying 2 paper cups. "Tea," he said. "It's not sake, but it'll do." She smiled faintly. "You saved the company." "No," he said softly. "You did. I just showed you where the bodies were buried." She chuckled. Morbid but accurate. There was a pause. The kind of quiet that isn't awkward but full of weight, of decisions yet unspoken. "You could have walked away," she said finally. "I gave you the option, and instead, you chose to put yourself at risk." "I made that choice the day I stopped hiding," he said. "I just didn't know it until now. Victor, I want to offer you something. Officially." He raised an eyebrow. "Not security, not interpretation, something more permanent. A position I've been trying to fill for years but never trusted anyone enough to consider." She opened a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Director of Ethics and Cross, Cultural Affairs, full salary, full authority, reporting directly to me." Victor blinked. Of all the things he thought she might offer, this was not it. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for—" "You are," she cut in. "You see what others ignore. You speak truth when others stay silent. And you've lived both in visibility and integrity. That makes you more qualified than any resume I've ever read." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, slowly, he took the envelope. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," she said. "Just help me make this company something worth believing in." Outside, the stars began to prick the sky. It was a small thing, but it felt like a beginning. Later that week, Northbridge Media issued a public statement acknowledging serious internal violations under investigation and pledging transparency and reform. A new ethics board was announced, with Victor Thomas as its inaugural director. And in the lobby of the building where Victor once sat for 8 years as a silent guardian, a new plaque was unveiled. It bore a simple inscription: "For those who protect not just people but principles." Victor stood beside Ava that morning, her hand gripping his tightly. "Daddy," she whispered, "they put your name on the wall." "Yeah," he said, his voice caught between pride and disbelief. "They did." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "Does that mean you're famous?" He smiled. "No, baby. It means I finally stopped being invisible." Victor's first day as Director of Ethics and Cross-Cultural Affairs began long before sunrise. He arrived at the Midtown Manhattan office, dressed in a simple navy suit that was sharper than any security uniform he'd worn. The lobby bustled with familiar faces offering nods and murmured congratulations. Ava, his daughter, waited at the front, holding his hand tight. "You ready, Daddy?" she whispered. He smiled and squeezed her hand. "Let's do this." The office he entered was a modest suite with soft lighting and a single window overlooking the city. Rose had prepared it for him. A polished oak desk, a bookshelf filled with ethics and culture volumes, a small framed photo of the two of them at the plaque unveiling, and a card from Rose, "To someone who dared to speak truth." He set his daughter up at a makeshift corner table with crayons and paper and tucked her in. Then he closed the door and breathed deeply. After years of being invisible, the weight of responsibility felt heavier than any badge. His first task was drafting a code of ethics policy. It needed to reflect more than legal compliance. It required cultural sensitivity, transparency, whistleblower protection. He held a meeting with HR and legal, including Denise, who'd helped him before. They discussed employee rights, anonymous reporting systems, cross-lingual training. Victor spoke with authority, citing Japanese corporate values while acknowledging Northbridge's American roots. This wasn't about lecturing, it was about building bridges. He outlined an internal review board to oversee contracts and shipments, and suggested that all international agreements be vetted jointly by legal, ethics, and cultural review teams. Meanwhile, whispers from Carlyle's faction lingered. Some executives complained quietly, "He's just a guard. He's no Harvard ethics professor." Victor heard them in the halls as he passed by. He didn't ignore them, but he didn't let them stop him. He invited them to participate, offering them a chance to be part of the new board. By noon, 3 senior staff, initially resistant, agreed to collaborate. One, a woman named Meredith, volunteered to help craft training on unconscious bias and cultural competence. Slowly, resistance became conversation. In the afternoon, Rose walked in. She'd been working non-stop to reassure Hoshino and delay other negotiations until the internal audit was complete. She sat down and said, "How's it going?" Victor looked up from his notes. "It's underway. I have draft policy, whistleblower hotline, board review process. Next step is training module, clear communications to staff." Rose nodded. "Good. We need to launch before next month's shareholder meeting. And Victor, thank you." He bristled at the praise. "You earned this, Rose. I'm just the messenger." She reached over and placed a hand on his. "You're so much more." That evening, Victor gave his first company-wide address via live stream to offices in Tokyo, London, and Toronto. He stood in front of the new plaque inset into the lobby wall behind him. With Ava's drawing taped beside his notes, a rainbow under 2 figures holding hands, he began addressing employees. "Thank you for joining me. Today marks a new chapter in our company's history, one in which truth isn't just our policy, it's our foundation." He spoke in English, Japanese, and even a few phrases in Spanish, acknowledging the diversity of the Northbridge family. He talked about Carlyle's betrayal, about the importance of accountability and courage. He ended by saying, "No one is above scrutiny, and nobody is below respect." At home, Ava watched with wide eyes, whispering, "That's Daddy up there." Over the next week, Victor walked the halls more confidently than he ever had. He sat with the cleaning staff at lunch, listened to their concerns about safety and respect. He met with the IT team to ensure the anonymous hotline was tech secure. He attended a casual dinner with legal and cultural staff, guiding them through Japanese teaware traditions and McCarthy-era American respect frameworks. His presence, not his title, made the difference. He wasn't just a figurehead. He was building a culture. Rose noticed it all. She watched him deflect small jabs, build rapport, explain complex cultural context to engineers who thought ethics were just compliance. Once, she found him patiently translating a section of the employee newsletter into Japanese for a visiting intern, no fanfare, just quiet service. She realized that the company was listening to him in a way it had never listened to her because he spoke their languages, literally and socially. In contrast, Carlyle remained in isolation, waiting for a hearing. Some legal memos leaked to the press, questioning Victor's qualifications. "Who is this guy?" the headlines asked. "Guard-turned-ethics chief?" He didn't respond publicly. Instead, he invited one of the skeptical lawyers into his office. He showed him the plaque. He showed him the policy drafts. He reminded him, "Ethics isn't a degree, it's a decision, every day." One afternoon, Victor escorted a delegation of Japanese executives touring the facility. He introduced them to staff, explained each department's role in upholding standards, even demonstrated export log procedures. At day's end, their leader, Mr. Sato, approached him. "You honor the partnership, Mr. Thomas." Victor bowed. "I only speak your language because I learned to listen first." Back in her office, Rose received a message from Hoshino. "The board is impressed. The deal will proceed. Let us know when we meet in Tokyo." Her eyes misted. She sent a quick reply, then walked to Victor's office. She found him reviewing the whistleblower system. "You did this," she said. He looked up. "We did it," she smiled. "Let's start planning the trip." That night, Victor tucked Ava into bed. She looked at his jacket, no more badge. "You look like a real CEO now." He ruffled her hair. "Maybe one day, little one." She yawned. "Daddy, will your name always be on the wall?" "Always," he said, "because someone had to stand up." He turned out the light, closed her door, and sat in the living room with his old credentials spread out beside him. They didn't belong here anymore, but they didn't need to. Victor Thomas had found a place not beneath a nameplate, but above it, in the truth he spoke and the respect he earned. Victor woke before dawn, the Manhattan skyline dark and still beyond his window. Today marked his first international flight as promised, Tokyo. But instead of nerves, he felt a quiet confidence, a foundation built on months of integrity and hard work. Ava stirred beside him, her small hand seeking his. "Daddy," she mumbled, "be brave." He kissed her forehead, whispered, "Always." and quietly left. At JFK, Rose met him at Terminal 4. She'd flown in early to join him. Her expression was softer now, pride visible where once there'd been tension. "Ready?" she asked, placing a hand on his arm. "Lead the way," he answered. On board, Victor reviewed his notes. Elevator speech for the Japanese joint venture, cultural guidelines, talking points for Tokyo's board meeting. Rose sat beside him, flipping through slide decks for investor Q&A. They exchanged a glance of camaraderie, partners, no longer bound by hierarchy. Landing at Haneda, they were greeted by Hoshino's team. Mr. Sato, senior liaison, bowed deeply before Rose and Victor, followed by Hiroko, the cultural coordinator who'd arranged their itinerary. In transit, the sleek efficiency, the respectful nods of bowing staff reminded Victor of his years in Tokyo. He felt at home. Their first stop, a private breakfast in a tatami room overlooking a koi pond. Hoshino watched them over green tea. "I wanted this meeting to be more than business," he said in English with a gentle smile. "I want to show my respect for what your company is becoming." Rose offered a respectful bow. Victor added, "Thank you, sir," in Japanese. Hoshino's eyes brightened. "You speak with heart," he said, "and truth." In the boardroom later, they walked through the year-old ethics program, the anonymous hotline, the export changes, all crediting Victor's leadership. Japanese executives asked thoughtful questions. They noted the balance between American innovation and Japanese principle. At the end, Hoshino spoke again. "Ethics," he said, "is trust made visible." Rose translated briefly. Victor nodded, soaking up the resonance. But midway through, Carlyle's specter re-emerged. An anonymous tip apparently engineered claimed the hidden equipment was sold to meet deficits from Rose's first startup failure. Questions volleyed as thin-veiled allegations. Rose paused, calm as steel. "Those allegations are false," she said plainly. "We have evidence that this was Carlyle's scheme, and we have documented every transaction since then." Victor passed her a folder containing all audit reports, digital logs, surveillance stills. The room settled. Hoshino leaned forward. "Mistakes happen," he said, "but deception shatters trust. And I trust Northbridge." Afterward, during a quieter moment in the lounge, Victor asked Rose, "Are you okay?" She exhaled. "I thought international scrutiny would break me. Instead, it felt right." Victor said, "You didn't break. You became whole." She looked at him. "Couldn't have done it without you." He shook his head. "It was what you already had. You just needed someone to reflect it." They spent the afternoon visiting a small factory in Osaka producing logistics equipment. Workers paused respectfully to bow as Victor passed. A foreman bowed again, whispering thanks. "For bringing us honor." Victor translated, "They're moved by your company's rebuilt commitment to integrity." Afterward, Rose scribbled a note. "To build a global company, start with a conscience." She looked up at Victor, who understood immediately the golden thread of their journey. On the final evening, they attended a traditional kaiseki dinner, layers of delicate dishes, each with their ceremonial purpose. Conversation drifted from projections to personal growth to the importance of legacy. At one point, Hoshino silently tapped his glass and raised it. "To Rose and Victor," he said, in English, clear and heartfelt. "Our future is held together by the courage of two people who chose truth." They toasted under paper lantern light, city lights of Osaka blinking in the distance. Later, back in their hotel, Rose turned to Victor. "You've done more than build an ethics program. You've woven respect into culture." Victor looked away. "I just spoke what had to be said." She drew him close. "You gave me permission to speak too." The next morning, Victor walked downstairs in the lobby and paused before a framed calligraphy brushstroke, a Japanese proverb, "Senjitsu wa hino ugokasu." Integrity moves people. He touched the frame lightly, as if claiming it. A door opened behind him. Hoshino smiled. "Mr. Thomas, our team would be honored if you stayed and helped guide us through this transition." The invitation hung between them. Victor nodded. "I'd be honored." Back on the flight home, Victor looked at Rose. She smiled. "What's next?" he replied. "We keep building." Her eyes glistened. Together. They landed in New York. Just as the sun was rising, two figures stepping into a new day. Ava would meet them, awaiting stories. Victor's heart fluttered. A father, an ethics leader, a bridge between cultures, not invisible anymore, but visible in honor, visible in courage, and visible in truth. Victor awoke to the sunrise filtering through his curtains, the city below already humming with its weekday rhythm. But today, the bustle felt different, less chaotic, more deliberate. He stretched, feeling the lingering effects of the time zone change. It was Monday, and New York's pulse awaited. Ava's laughter echoed down the hall her first day back at school after the Tokyo trip. Victor allowed himself a brief smile before dressing in his navy suit, ready to dive back into the entity they'd begun rebuilding. He stepped into the lobby and found Denise waiting HR's head, her face, a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "They want to meet you," she said, voice hushed. Victor nodded, reminder flickering in his memory. Today was the first ethics committee meeting with more than just staff. Investors requested oversight. Ethics would no longer be a sidebar. It was now center stage. The conference room filled quickly. Investors on video feeds from London and Toronto came online. Local executives took seats around a polished oak table. Victor stood, positioned beside Rose, who gave him a reassuring nod. He opened with a simple phrase, "Welcome back." His voice resonated steady, calm, unwavering. Each slide he presented outlined the ethics infrastructure: whistleblower hotline, audit trails, regular training. The webcam spotted him through the feeds. Reactions mirrored each other: curiosity, respect, occasional skepticism. One voice from Toronto spoke, "We need measurable assurance. What metrics do you recommend?" Victor replied, "Anonymous reporting response time, audit cycle completion rates, cultural survey results. By next quarter, we expect a 40% increase in employee-reported concerns with a corresponding resolution rate above 90%. His words were data and trust woven together. Questions came fast. "Might this slow business?" "Short-term," Rose answered, stepping up. "But long-term integrity builds brand loyalty, reduces legal risk, and ensures sustainable growth." Victor carried on. "Ethics isn't charity, it's insurance." A wave of heads nodded. The committee ended by approving the framework unanimously. Victor felt the weight lift. They had crossed from concept to commitment. Later that afternoon, Rose found him in his office reviewing survey feedback. Employees praised the new hotline, saying they'd never felt so heard. Skeptics dropped off. Confidence spread. As she stepped in, Victor looked up. "We're actually doing this," he said. She smiled. "We are." She sat beside him. "I want to celebrate tonight. Just you, me, and Ava." He nodded, warmth blooming. The evening brought them to a quiet Italian restaurant near Central Park. Candlelight flickered as they toasted. Ava's giggles contrasted with the soft clink of glasses. Rose raised her fork. "I'm proud of you." Victor reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You gave me a role, a purpose." She shook her head. "We gave each other purpose." He watched Ava dance with a breadstick. "Look at her." Rose turned. "That's our world. We rebuild it for her." The next morning, Victor walked the halls with renewed energy. He paused by the shipping bay door, Carlyle's old domain. The room was now locked behind double access, monitored and restricted. A small sign read, "Authorized personnel only." It symbolized change. He moved on to the IT suite, greeted the team with a nod, and reminded them, "Every report matters." They responded with respect. He paused at cleaning staff lounging in the break room. "How's morale?" he asked quietly. One of them, Maria, said, "Better, sir. We feel safer." He smiled. "That's why we do this." Just before lunch, the phone rang. On screen, Mr. Sato, Tokyo. He'd flown back early. "Victor, San, Rose-san," he said in English, tinged with politeness. "I have an opportunity for you." Victor and Rose exchanged glances. Sato explained that a sister company in Nagoya planned to replicate Northbridge's ethics program. They wanted Victor to help lead its launch. He called it a culture export. Rose's heart swelled. This was more than professional, it was legacy. Victor accepted. By afternoon, Rose led a workshop in the boardroom with external counsel and settlement advisors. They discussed sensitive contract clauses, potential red flags. Victor guided them through hypothetical scenarios. What qualifies as retaliation? What about cross-border data flow? He referenced Japanese court precedents and American labor laws. Executives leaned in, scribbling notes. He concluded, "Ethics is a living system, not a policy document. It requires constant upkeep and courage." There was applause, genuine. At day's end, Victor rejoined Rose at her office. The sun had dipped low. They stood together by the window. She said, "You've changed more than procedures, you've changed people." He wrapped an arm around her. "That's the goal." She nodded. "And you've changed me." He turned to her. Then our next chapter begins. That weekend, at home, Ava curled into him on the sofa. He opened a new folder, titled Nagoya Expansion. She asked how old she'd be. He kissed her hair. "When you're 12. She nodded, drifting off. He closed the folder and looked at his credentials, laid out a DDS badge, degrees, but now overshadowed by his heart's work. He knew he didn't need them. He had found something more meaningful. The city lights glittered outside. Victor realized that this journey was far from over. But for now, he had a daughter to raise, a company to guide, a world to shape, and he had Rose, his partner in truth. The future awaited, built on courage, respect, and unwavering integrity. Victor stepped onto the Midtown Manhattan sidewalk, the crisp morning air carrying promise. Today was different. The Nagoya expansion team was arriving for the pilot program, and he had prepared every detail. Inside the expansive training suite, he oversaw the setup of translation headsets, Japanese and English signage, and accessibility options. A banner at the front of the room read, "Northbridge Systems, Integrity Unites Us." He felt the same flutter as that first day at headquarters, but now it was tempered by weeks of success and stability. At precisely 9 a.m., the group from Nagoya entered. 10 executives, cultural liaison officers, and legal advisors, led by Miss Nakamura, the chief coordinator. She bowed deeply, and Victor responded with an easy nod in return. "Welcome to New York," he opened, voice clear and warm. "We're honored to share our journey and learn from yours." The delegation's translator relayed in perfect mixed English and Japanese. Rose appeared quietly at the back, seated next to Mr. Sato via video feed. She smiled at Victor, her confidence mirrored in his posture. He began with a story from his childhood, how his mother taught him that truth is the foundation of trust, and how he had almost lost that foundation before finding purpose again. The audience listened. Rapt executives rarely heard personal narrative in corporate training, but this was different. He spoke without notes, challenges, mistakes, the Carlyle scandal, the plaque unveiling. He wove in cultural references, the Japanese concept of seisho, jungshang, honest commerce, and contrasted it with the American ideal of fair play. He paused and explained the newly implemented whistleblower hotline, its anonymous design, multi-language options, and safety protocols. He tapped the panel. "Let's see how it works." An engineer from Tokyo stood to ask a question. "What about cultural hesitation? Some employees may fear losing face." Victor nodded. "We addressed that. Reports don't require names. Investigations are confidential, and training emphasizes respect and empathy. Let me show you our scenario module." He cued a simulation. An employee observes suspicious data transfer. The module guides them through reporting, choosing the hotline, submitting evidence, and following up. The room reacted thoughtfully, some scribbling notes, others nodding. Mid-morning, they paused for tea and sweets. Victor circulated, walking side by side with Nakamura. She asked how the board responded in Japan. He explained Rose's leadership, the public apology, and the ethics plaque. Nakamura smiled. "That is powerful. We will adapt this with care." She added, "We wish to work with you to create joint training materials." Rose stepped in. "Victor and I would be honored." The announcement was met with polite applause. Over lunch, the mood warmed. Japanese executives shared stories about small village councils that set up local trust committees models for Northbridge's own employee councils. Victor and Rose listened, integrating these building blocks into their approach. That afternoon, a sudden buzz spread. Carlyle Grant had called a press scrum outside the building. He was claiming scapegoat status, hinting that Victor had politicized the ethics function, accusing him of overreach. Reporters were gathering microphones, cameras angled upward. It was the first media challenge since Tokyo. Rose looked at Victor, concern in her eyes. They exchanged a glance. Victor straightened. He walked toward the entrance. Rose followed. Carlyle, suit slightly rumpled, was speaking into a mic. "This man is not qualified. His credentials are self-aggrandizing. Northbridge has placed corporate morality above efficiency, and this will hurt their bottom line," the reporters murmured, ready for controversy. Victor stepped forward, voice measured. "Good afternoon. Yes, I carry a background in diplomatic security and cross-cultural studies. Yes, I've led this ethics initiative. But I stand here not because of credentials, but because of trust earned and results shown. Since implementing the ethics board, reports to Hotline rose by 55%, investigations were resolved within 14 days, and employee trust scores improved dramatically." He paused, letting reporters catch each word. "When I signed the plaque, I signed for accountability. If anyone doubts me, I invite them to review our metrics. Northbridge is stronger because we chose truth over convenience." And reporters shifted. Carlyle stumbled over a counterpoint. The crowd pressed for a reaction from Rose. She appeared beside Victor, calm. "Northbridge put integrity first. That's not weakness, it's strategy." She faced reporters. "We will release full audit results next week. We welcome scrutiny." Carlyle's face paled, the press losing interest in conflict. Inside later, Rose embraced Victor. "You stopped a scandal from becoming a crisis." He shook his head. "Together," she smiled. "Then let's move forward." The final training session began with Victor and Rose co-leading. They introduced a joint Japanese-American ethics certification, a new badge that recognizes cross-cultural integrity. The delegates buzzed excitedly. Victor guided small group exercises. Rose facilitated debriefs. They moved with synergy as natural as old friends. By 5 p.m., the delegation had made commitments. Implementing the ethics board in Nagoya, adopting multilingual hotlines, and planning a joint culture exchange trip for teams. Nakamura shook Victor's hand firmly. "You have given us much more than a program. You've given us understanding." The group departed with warm bows and heartfelt farewells. Later that night, back in the Manhattan apartment, Ava sat on the couch with crayons, drawing Japanese lanterns. Victor watched her, resting his forehead against hers. "You know what this is?" he asked. "Integrity," she replied. Rose, entering with takeout, smiled. They shared noodles on the couch, laughter weaving through the warmth of their home. The city pulsed outside. Victor realized that what began as a crisis and a chance encounter had become a movement, one that crossed oceans, cultures, and histories. He had stepped out of invisibility into a role larger than himself. And as he watched Ava hold his hand, he knew the next steps would matter more than ever. They would carry truth further, build trust deeper, and show the world that integrity truly moves people. Victor stepped off the elevator on the 47th floor and paused, listening to the hum of the office. Today was the quarterly board meeting, the one where performance would be measured not just in revenue but in trust. He glanced at his reflection in the glass wall, navy suit crisp, tie straight, badge of ethics director pinned firmly. Ava's words echoed in his mind. "You look like a real CEO." Was he ready to face skeptics again? He squared his shoulders and walked down the foyer. Inside the boardroom, Rose was greeting directors. One of them, Meredith, smiled and whispered, "Nervous?" Rose shook her head, but his eyes found Victor's and the answer came without words. "We're ready." At exactly 9:15, Rose called the meeting to order. After reviewing financials, she turned to Victor. "Now for my partner in integrity." Victor stood, clearing his throat, and began his report. Hotline usage, audit outcomes, staff ethics training metrics, and the emerging Japan partnership performance. He used numbers, stories, charts, each slide underscored with transparency. He narrated an anonymous employee report that uncovered a minor compliance issue, resolved internally, and used as a training case rather than a blame fest. He highlighted improvements. Employee trust index up 35%, safety incidents down 20%, external reputation score climbing. The directors leaned in. Some frowned, then nodded. Carlyle's seat remained empty, not a scandal erased, but a lesson learned. After the presentation, questions arose. A board member from LA asked, "Has this affected speed to market?" Victor smiled. "Initially, yes, but now, with clear processes, we see fewer compliance delays. Our timelines are cleaner, not rushed. We're growing deliberately." Another asked, "Can this scale?" He answered, "We have templates for Japan. We're drafting modules for Europe and Latin America. It's a framework, not a policy." He watched as confidence spread through the room. Rose closed the meeting with a final thought. Profits matter, but without trust, they fall apart. Victor didn't just protect us, he empowered us. She looked around. Today, we vote to make Ethics Board a permanent committee, chaired by Victor. Hands raised, the room erupted softly in applause. Victor felt his throat tighten. He looked at Rose and saw pride, respect, partnership. He nodded. Afterward, in the hallway, reporters were waiting, internal company bulletin journalists, snapping photos. Victor stepped forward. He emphasized, "Ethics is not a cost. It's our brand's integrity in action." Cameras clicked. Rose joined him, side by side. They answered questions. Upcoming Nagoya launch, next steps, employee feedback. Victor ended with, "These numbers reflect people, and people deserve honesty." In the afternoon, Dale, the head of IT, came to his office. "Victor, you're changing culture. People are talking about trust, about leadership, about courage." Victor looked at data on his screen. Anonymous gratitude messages from staff, entire departments volunteering for ethics training, new hires citing the hotline as a reason they joined. He felt grounded. Rose entered with her own news. Hoshino wrote again an offer to invest in a joint university scholarship for ethics and technology exchange between New York and Tokyo. She handed Victor the draft. "Your vision is becoming global." Victor's heart swelled. He folded it carefully. "Imagine Ava applying," Rose smiled. "Imagine her leading it." That evening, Victor picked up Ava from her ballet class. She climbed into his arms. "Daddy, guess what? I told my teacher about the ethics board." She giggled. He asked, "What did she say?" "She said you're brave and honest. Like a knight." He hugged her. "That's my girl." Ho! At home, as the city glowed outside, Victor sat at his desk writing an outline for the Nagoya Partnership Agreement. He paused, touched the framed plaque photo on his desk, then slid his old credentials carefully into a drawer. They belonged to a past life. Tonight, his identity lived in the policies he shaped, the trust he built, and the daughter who saw him as a knight. As he closed his laptop, Rose stepped in. They shared a quiet moment, two people brought together by truth, now leading together. She whispered, "Our next chapter starts tomorrow." He nodded. "I'm ready." Outside, the city lights pulsed with possibility, illuminating a new era for Northbridge Systems guided by courage, integrity, and the invisible hero who made it visible. Victor awoke with the sunlight slicing through his blinds, illuminating a day that felt different, weighty with possibility. Today, the ethics expansion blueprint into Nagoya was scheduled for presentation at Tokyo headquarters. He dressed in his navy suit, ironed crisp, his ethics director pin gleaming. He kissed Ava goodbye, promising to call later. He met Rose at the airport lounge. She held 2 cups of coffee, her eyes bright. "Feeling ready?" she asked. "More than ever," he replied. Their flight was quiet, each reviewing notes, Victor refining cultural training timelines, Rose preparing investor Q&A. They shared a brief smile before boarding. The familiarity between them was now professional synergy woven through personal trust. Landing at Narita, they were guided through immigration swiftly. Victor noticed Japanese kindness in every gesture, the polite bows, soft guidance. They were escorted to a sleek car that carried them to Tokyo's Shinbashi district, where Northbridge's headquarters was located. By late afternoon, they entered the glass-walled conference suite, greeted by smiling employees and executives including Mr. Sato, waiting with gentle applause. "This is the team that built it," Sato said, gesturing to Victor and Rose. Victor nodded respectfully, bowing. He began with context, the journey from crisis to ethics-driven culture, the Nagoya pilot's design to replicate this success. Rose followed, laying out the projected timeline, resource needs, KPIs, and reporting structures. Executives listened closely, heads nodded. One woman spoke. "Will our Japanese staff easily adapt to the whistleblower process?" Victor replied, "Our system is multilingual, confidential, and culturally respectful. Employees can choose anonymous digital methods or hotline phrased in Japanese, supported by trained liaisons sensitive to face saving." Smiles reflected relief and acceptance. Then a delegate asked, What if senior staff resist? Rose answered, "We anticipate and train leadership first. Integrity must start at the top." Victor added, "As in New York, we'll run pilot cases, document outcomes, and showcase leadership modeling." Another executive commented, "Your transparency is unusual in a good way." Victor absorbed the tone, aware of the slow shift in balance from suspicion to trust. After the session, they walked the corridor. Victor paused before a wall lined with Japanese calligraphy scrolls. He read one phrase quietly, "Igwansing wa sintlai o gizik, consistency builds trust." He touched it. Rose placed her hand on his shoulder. "You're doing more than business." He exhaled. "We're building bridges and respect." That evening, they attended a private dinner hosted by Sato and his team at a traditional ryote. Lanterns, tatami floors, flowing dishes, and quiet conversation guided the evening. Victor translated for Rose each course introduced with cultural nuance. He sensed a respectful openness replace formal restraint. Midway through, Sato stood. "To honor those whose courage built trust," he said. They toasted. Rose looked at Victor, tears glinting. He bowed and sipped. The next morning, Victor walked through the Nagoya office, now already preparing for ethics training. He greeted staff with a bow. A young trainee approached him. "Sir, thank you. I feel prepared to report if necessary." Victor nodded. That's the point. He felt purpose. Back in Tokyo, a late afternoon debrief. Japanese project leads, Sato, Rose, and Victor, discussed rollout timelines, local language materials, training modules. Victor emphasized adaptation to local customs and the importance of local champions. Sato agreed to lead crowd-funded ethics meetups across branch offices. Rose announced Northbridge would fund an annual Truth in Tech award for ethical achievement. The room responded with warmth. Their final evening in Tokyo was spent at the rooftop bar overlooking the skyscrapers. Lights glittered like stars fallen to earth. They shared quiet sushi and conversation. Victor turned to Rose. "I couldn't have done this without you." She smiled. "We did it together." He nodded. "What if Ava grows up in this world?" She grinned. "She'll know truth when she sees it." He took her hand. "Then we keep building." On the flight home, Victor reviewed photos. The Nagoya staff bowing around the ethics banner. Rose standing with Sato at the dinner. The plaque they unveiled in the Tokyo HQ foyer. Integrity across oceans. He saved each image. Ava's school had posted a selfie of her at lunchtime, drawing a Japanese peace sign. Victor's heart swelled. He closed his eyes and imagined a future. At JFK, Rose and Victor stepped into the arrivals hall. Reporters waited. Northbridge had flagged their international ethics milestone. Flashbulbs popped. Volunteer employees cheered. Victor waved awkwardly. Ava, who had arrived early, jumped into his arms with a giggle. Rose leaned into him as they walked to the car. That night at home, they shared takeout in the living room, watching city lights through the window. Ava dozed. Victor studied his old credentials on the coffee table but didn't touch them. They were relics. What mattered was the work they had done and the future they were forging. Rose rested her head on Victor's shoulder. He whispered, "To the next chapter?" She smiled and nodded. The future loomed large. Nagoya fully launched, Tokyo embraced, scholarship fund in motion, employee-driven ethics across continents. They had built more than a company, they had shaped a legacy. He stared out at the skyline. He had stepped into light and brought others with him. Ava stirred and whispered, "Daddy?" He kissed her softly and said, "Always, baby, always." Victor woke to the soft rumble of rain against his apartment window. Autumn had deepened its tone in New York leaves, now crisp underfoot, evenings growing longer. But today's early hour felt urgent. He had an 8 a.m. breakfast meeting at corporate headquarters with a group of ethics scholars jurying the Truth in Tech scholarship proposals. Last night, Rose and Ava stayed late writing the criteria, evidence of their shared commitment. Now he dressed quickly, straightening his tie, thinking of the future generations who might one day carry their work forward. At headquarters, the sleek conference room was bright, polished, hopeful. Rose greeted him with that familiar warmth. Behind them, the framed plaque declared, "Integrity across oceans." Victor cleared his throat as the scholarship jurors filed in. Professors, nonprofit leaders, tech ethicists, each representing a bridge between business and public good. Over croissants and coffee, they began the discussion, balancing innovation with social responsibility. The first applicant, a young woman from Chicago, proposed AI oversight in policing algorithms. Victor listened as she outlined her research with passion. When the discussion turned to corporate partnership, Victor spoke. Ethics funding must be more than sponsorship. It must be stewardship. His words steered the debate into territory where funding obligations and ethical obligations intersected. After presentations, the jurors asked hard questions about program sustainability, fairness in applicant selection, and global accessibility. Victor referenced the company's recent successes in Japan and Nagoya, noting that ethics isn't static, it must evolve with each culture and technology. Rose added, "This scholarship is Northbridge's pledge to global truth." Nods of approval followed. By time the meeting ended, the jury had selected the first 3 scholars, 2 domestic, 1 international. They looked to Victor and Rose for next steps. The responsibility landed like gravity, but with promise. Later that morning, Victor walked the corridor and spotted Carlisle Grant in a far corner, a visitor badge pinned to his lapel. Carlisle's tenure had officially ended months ago, but he'd returned to talk under the scholarship program. He approached cautiously. Victor nodded. "Carlisle." The man's face was tight. I read the scholarship call. I applied." Victor raised his brows. "You applied?" Carlisle nodded. "I ran a philanthropic fund after I left. I've changed. I want to contribute, not just criticize." Victor studied him. "Your application is due next week." Carlisle exhaled. "Thank you." The moment trembled with tension and possibility. As afternoon light tilted west, Victor joined HR for a review of employee listening sessions held this month. They gathered data on how the ethics program was perceived internally. Rose entered and joined, reviewing the charts: 82% positive response, 10% uncertain, 8% skeptical, but that was encouraging progress. They discussed targeted engagement with lagging departments. Victor noted that consistent leadership was key. Rose nodded. "We'll have another round next quarter." They planned internal communications, town halls, anonymous surveys, cultural training refreshers. It was steady, less dramatic work, but foundational. That evening, Victor picked up Ava from daycare. She swung into his arms. "Daddy, guess what? I told my class about ethics today." She beamed. They asked what integrity means. Victor hugged her tightly. "You answered?" She nodded, eyes shining. "A promise you keep even when nobody's looking." Victor wiped a tear. "Perfect." At dinner, Rose unveiled news from Tokyo HQ. Nagoya's scholarship counterpart would launch next year. A joint committee across Tokyo, Nagoya, and New York would select scholars regionally. Victor felt a swell of accomplishment. It was becoming global, living. Before bedtime, he tucked Ava in again. She held a sketch she drew, 3 children each wearing distinct outfits handing a trophy to each other under a globe. He kissed her forehead. "You drew us," she whispered, "because we care." He nodded, stroking her hair. "Because you made us care." She drifted to sleep, smiling. In the late evening, Rose joined him at the desk. She passed him Carlisle's scholarship essay. It was thoughtful, reflective, acknowledging past mistakes and future hope. "I want him to have a chance," she said quietly. Victor read carefully, then closed it. "Opportunity is the best form of redemption." He looked at Rose. "We should consider it." She smiled. "Together." They leaned against each other, maps of Tokyo and Nagoya pinned above their desk, scholarship entries waiting, rain tapping on windows. New York skyline shimmered in the night. Victor realized their work had come far from an improbable translator to global ethics leader, father, partner. The road ahead was long. But tonight, they celebrated a smaller, deeper victory, a world inching toward accountability, guided by courage and respect. And every time Victor tucked Ava in, he knew the next generation would grow up in that light. Victor sat at the polished oak desk in his office on the 47th floor, the New York skyline ablaze with sunrise, and finally exhaled. This morning marked the culmination of their year-long journey, the official launch of the Truth in Tech Global Ethics Scholarship. It would unite scholars from New York, Tokyo, and Nagoya in a 3-way exchange program. Rose knocked and entered, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "It's time," she said softly. He nodded. Together, they arrived at the auditorium where faculty, executives, scholarship finalists, and their families gathered. A large screen displayed the scholarship logo, a globe wrapped in open hand. Victor opened. "Welcome to the first step of building global integrity." The crowd responded with respectful applause. He introduced Dr. Nakamura from Nagoya and Mr. Sato from Tokyo via live link. Around him, scholars beamed, each chosen for research in AI fairness, cross-cultural communication, and environmental responsibility. As they spoke, Victor thought about Ava's drawing the 3 children passing a globe. Today, it had become real. After the final speaker, Carlyle Grant stepped forward. His appearance surprised many, but when he spoke, the room hushed. He described his journey from scandal and ignorance to reflection and a deep desire to contribute to global ethics, a transformation that began with Victor's forgiveness and Rose's openness. "Integrity," he said, voice steady, "is not defined by a moment, but by the lessons after." He offered Victor a respectful bow. Victor felt a familiar rush. Redemption was no less powerful than justice. The ceremony ended with a formal handshake across continents. Cameras clicked. Executives from Tokyo and Nagoya flew in to celebrate. Victor looked out at the sea of faces, scholars, partners, staff, Rose. He realized the ripple they began months ago was now moving oceans. Later, they retired to the rooftop lounge. The sun had reached its peak. Victor raised a glass. To truth, Rose joined. To courage, guests echoed. Ava danced between their legs, laughter light. She tugged Victor's sleeve. "Daddy, are we superheroes?" He scooped her up. "We're just people who chose to be honest." She looked at Rose. "Promise you always will?" Rose nodded. "Always." Back in their apartment that night, snow began to drift against the window. Victor tucked Ava into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You are our future." He closed the door and walked to the living room, where Rose awaited beside the framed proof of scholarship winners and global pledge. He pulled her into an embrace. "We did it." She placed a hand over his heart. "We did this for her. For everyone." He guided her gaze to the framed credentials on the wall. Victor's university diploma, certification in Japanese translation, and the Northbridge plaque. He gestured beyond them to the city lights outside. "These," he said, "are past." Then quieter, "Our work lives here." He tapped his chest. They stood together, facing a world changed by a single choice: to speak truth in silence, courage in fear, unity in division. The snow whispered. The lights shone. Victor Thomas, once invisible, now embodied integrity's promise. And as the city slept, their legacy grew gentle, invisible, unshakable. True value often lies where no one is looking. Sometimes, the most overlooked person holds the key to everything. Never underestimate quiet courage, and never judge someone's worth by their title or uniform. Respect, integrity, and skill can come from the most unexpected places.